So, Mom,
So Pookie.
what are some things that, looking back now, might have been warning signs of my self-injury?
Okay, when I think back to me discovering that you were injuring yourself, I didn't know. I don't remember any change in your behavior. I didn't see any scars or blood or anything like that. The way that I found out that you were harming was because your boyfriend's mom called me and told me that you had confided in him that you were self-harming. That's how I found out. So there was no signs that I recall that twigged me in.
Okay. It's just the phone call.
Were
there any signs that I had self-injured within the last day? Something that you would have seen and thought, okay, she's self-harmed within the last 24 hours?
All I can think of is that if I had found maybe some Kleenexes with blood on them or something like that in your room, that might have been a sign to me that you had been harming. But you had a messy room. And you could have lied to me. I mean, you could have told me that, you know, those were old, or you had a bloody nose, or I mean, you could always come up with an excuse. I didn't really have evidence that you were harming. My best sign that you might have been self-harming, or how old or how long ago you'd harmed, probably was by looking at your arms or finding a cut. That's how I would know. You know, I could tell if they were fresh, right? If they were recent, if they hadn't scabbed or healed very well. As I got to know you better, though, like probably a few years into your treatment, I could almost anticipate when you were going to, though. I could sort of tell by your demeanor that you were upset, that you weren't happy, and you would sort of skulk off to your room, and I'd think, okay, here we go, this is it. Okay. So I could tell when you were going to, but
like warning signs ahead of time.
Yeah, I could just tell by your demeanor that you were probably overwhelmed, not happy, and that you might harm yourself.
And how did you handle it the first time you found me doing it?
Not very well, Pookie. I remember one incident in particular, and I don't know if it was the first time I saw you self-harming. I don't think it was the first time, but I think I probably would have been fairly, like the first time, I'm guessing, you tell me if I'm right, fairly abrupt, angry, brusque. Like I would have been probably like, stop that and take your stuff away and clean this up and clean off your arm and let me look at it. And you know, I would have been the angry nurse in emergency. That's probably how I would have been for you. You know, really not very compassionate, not very empathetic. I would have been angry probably, and abrupt with you. Yeah. And clinical.
Yeah, kind of medical. And
yeah, we're gonna treat the cut. That's it. Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. What was your fear when you found out about my cutting?
Well, my fear, I don't know, I have so many thoughts. I think my fear, though, was that you would, as the cutting progressed, my fear was that you were going to accidentally hit an artery and die. That was my big fear. Behind that, though, was the fear that I couldn't keep you safe. And then behind that was the fear that I was an ineffective parent, that I wasn't a good mom, that you had some needs that I didn't know how to meet. You had some behaviors that weren't healthy that I couldn't make you stop. I couldn't control you. I couldn't fix you. And I was ineffective. That was probably the underlying fear.
What measures did you take to ensure my safety?
Well, ultimately, what I learned was that I could not ensure your safety. But I went to I was a slow learner, I'll say, in that regard. It took me a while to figure that out. It was, I think initially I tried just, um, I thought maybe at first, maybe just my disapproval would stop you.
Oh, she doesn't like this.
Oh, this is a bad idea. It's a bad idea. Mom gets angry. I shouldn't do this. I started with that, and then I would escalate that into maybe checking your arms, and then I would escalate that into searching your room and making sure that you didn't have anything sharp in your room. Then I would try random checks, and I would burst into your room when you weren't expecting it, and try and catch you at it. And then it got to the point where I thought, I'm going to take everything out of your room. Like, I'm going to make it into like a psych assessment room in an emergency department. I'm going to take everything out of your room and just put a mattress on the floor, and I'm going to alarm your door and your windows so that I'll know if you're leaving the room, so that then I'll know that if you go to sleep at night, if I, once you're in that room at night and I set the alarms, this is insanity. I know this is crazy. This is where I got to. Then I will know that you are not able to hurt yourself, which is ridiculous because you still could. Like,
yeah,
this was the craziness of it, right? And I remember I actually bought an alarm. I remember going so far as to buy an alarm and getting ready in my own head to take everything out of your room. And I remember talking to someone about this and saying, this is what I'm thinking of doing, like a professional. And she said, and she kind of leaned in gently and said, that's crazy. And
a good friend.
Yeah, and I thought, it's not crazy. This is what I've been driven to. This is where I'm at. So, and her blunt but necessary statement to me was, Allie might die. You need to learn to accept that you cannot control this, and that your ultimate fear may materialize. And I remember looking at her thinking, that's not acceptable. I won't accept it. I guess no. But ultimately, I was driving myself and you and everybody else in the house insane. So I had to come to some acceptance that I couldn't control this. I couldn't manage you. I couldn't make you feel different, and I couldn't make you stop. So that was how I handled it. To answer your question.
That was
not well.
hard.
Not well. Not well.
I'm glad you didn't put my mattress on the floor.
I'm glad too.
Do you remember the first time I asked you for help? How did I do it, and how did you feel?
Yeah, I think what I learned eventually was that you wouldn't ask me for help unless you felt accepted, validated, and safe. And so it was many years into your cutting, I think, before you actually asked me for help. You would act out in ways that let us know you needed help, but you would never ask me for help, because I wasn't a safe place to come to when you weren't feeling good, because I was blunt and clinical and angry and fearful and controlling. And so I think by the time I figured out that, oh, okay, so if I had to really empathize with what you were experiencing. I had to kind of understand that, okay, so what is happening for Allie is that, she's not just being an idiot trying to ruin my life. She's experiencing, intense emotions that she does not know how to process or work through or handle, and this is a way that she takes control. Those are my words. And so when I noticed that you were hurting or that you had harmed, when I approached it differently and in a way that said, like, I'm sorry that you're hurting. I can see that you're struggling. This must be really hard for you. I love you, and I know you're gonna get this when if you keep working at it, kind of thing. That then you started to feel safer with me, and you started to trust me, and I think that was the crux of learning validation and empathy, was that it built trust, repaired the relationship a fair amount, and you then would make the effort and say to me, I don't feel good, and then I could respond in a way that was helpful instead of pushing you away, making you hide from me.
I think it was also you would kind of, I can recall there was a time when you would say, is there anything I can do? You would give me, you'd feel empathetic toward me, and you would kind of make it a safe space to talk about it. And then it also opened a door for me to say, I need to go see someone, or like it kind of taught me how to reach out and notice it in myself ahead of time.
That's awesome.
What did you notice in yourself while all of this was going on?
Our house was pretty chaotic. We had a lot going on with your brothers at the time. I was not well. I wouldn't say I had ever learned how to really look after myself. My MO was action and manage everything, right? And so, because if I'm in charge, everything's going to be great. And so what had been happening then for a while at that time, probably about a year and a half at least, by the time you started to harm, was that I'd had a lot, I would say neither Dad or I was doing super well at that point. We weren't looking after ourselves very well. We were stressed, we were tired, we were scared, we were overwhelmed, and I think my response to all of that was become more controlling and do more things.
Words to live by.
Yeah, do more things, control more. And there was no so what was happening for me while all this was going on was I was terrified. I was just absolutely terrified. I was terrified, like I said before, that I was ineffective as a parent, not a good mom. I'd somehow failed you. I'd somehow done something wrong or not done something right that had led to this problem that you were experiencing. I mean, we have a, it's a whole other story. We have a whole, I won't go down that rabbit hole about our society and mothers, but anyway, mothers ought to be able to kiss it and make it better. And I couldn't. And it was really, really tough to accept that I didn't have control. I guess that was ultimately, and I spent years trying to come to terms with the fact that this wasn't my fault, and that, I guess, and the fact that I was not your solution, I was your mother. It's a limited role, right?
That's a good way of putting it.
Thanks, Pookie.
Is there anything that you would like to say to a parent or a caregiver that is currently in the same position that you were in?
Yes, I would say to someone who's sitting down and telling me, I would say, try not to take it personally. What's happening is that you love someone who's hurting, and they need help. And again, like back to, you're not the solution. The solution's out there and in here, right? But you're not it. So don't try and fix it. But be supportive and stick with it. Because and along with the stick with it piece, like I talked about, I wasn't very good at looking after myself. More action, more control. that was not the solution for me. The solution for me was learning how to look after myself, right? Role modeling what I'm asking you to do,
Yeah.
right? Look after myself, and you need to, like, I need to learn how to manage my feelings, and you need to learn how to manage your feelings, and, you know, build trust and preserve the relationship and demonstrate empathy and validation and all that sort of, those sort of skills. And so I think I would say to that person, you know, be kind to yourself, get help for you, get help for the person that you love, and work on the relationship. Not so much managing the behaviors, but work on the relationship with the person that's struggling.
That was very well put.
Thanks, Pookie. Thanks.
Thanks for sitting down with me.
Anytime.
Thanks for listening.